going to cover a lot of the basics today, like I always do, but I'm going to try to skim through them because a lot of you have been here before and you don't want to hear the same thing. But they are extremely important to cover. The basics for whether you are a businessman and you have a plumbing company, or if you have a title company, if you run a catering service, you have to stick to the basics, right? There's always basics, and if you deviate from them, eventually you're going to fail. So we're going to cover those basics rather quickly. I'm going to go into some of the services we offer and then where I started, because I'm going to just jump into that real quick because I started where a lot of you folks are now. I just wanted you to be cognizant of I just didn't start where I am now. I had to work my way to this point, and I still have a journey ahead of me. So the reason we do these workshops is to educate, to learn by teaching. So when I'm teaching, I'm actually learning too. And because I tend to get ahead of myself, and I want to always just keep moving forward and buying properties and expanding and growing, and a lot of times that gets you into trouble because you keep digging the hole, and the next thing you know, you're in a big hole and you don't really have anything to show for it. So sometimes it's best to slow down and stick to the basics. So by teaching the basics, I learn a little bit. Most important, we do these because of the law of reciprocity. So I do these for a selfish reason because I want to generate business for my companies, but I never ask for it. So the reason we do these is just to give good quality information for you guys, and you can use this because this is stuff I use every day in this market on a daily basis, and this is practical knowledge that you'll be able to take and use. And by doing that, I've developed the relationships with people here who've lent me money to do my projects because they realize they don't want to do real estate investing. They'd rather lend me the money. They also have partnered up with me, or they've referred deals to me, or they've referred business to my other companies. The other companies we have are Deacon Hoover Real Estate Advisors, which is your standard, hey, we're a real estate agency. We can help you find your next home. We can help you sell your next home, okay? We also specialize in real estate investments. So we have about 14 or 15, how many agents do we have now, Ian? We have 16 agents, and it sounds like a lot, but I mean, it's not in the grand scheme of things. Some companies like Howard Hanna, Keller Williams, Coldwell Banker, they might have an office of 200 plus agents. But the great thing about our company is if you're an agent and you come on board, we can really help you from A to Z, and we're there for you to mentor you and walk you through every step, where we're not a big conglomerate office where you kind of get lost in the bullpen and they just say, go sell a house, So it's a good company to start with and help us grow, and that's how I started. I started with a really small company. It was a great experience. Mace Property Management, we manage about 700 units locally. The one thing I could say about hiring a property management company is, and you have to remember this, and I'm actually de-selling my product. And I'm going to tell you this because a property management company is a luxury. It's not a necessity. So when you own your own real estate, I really strongly suggest you learn how to manage it, because if you're a decent to good property manager, owner, and you can manage your properties, you're going to do it more efficiently than a property management company does, even my company. You just are. You're going to be able to keep your costs down. Response time will be shorter. You should be able to do a better job. Some people aren't cut off for it. They shouldn't be property managers, so therefore that's where we can help. Like if you move out of the area, you need somebody local, we're here to help. We can take over. If you just suck at being a property manager, then you should get out of the way and let us handle it. Just know that most investments don't have enough margin in them to account for property management. They just don't. There's too much demand, not enough supply. Therefore, finding a good deal is difficult. And then you have to include in that property management, repairs, vacancy. At the end of the day, it's hard to find a deal that has enough margin in it to warrant hiring a property manager. And a bad property manager can make your investment work half as good as it should, too. So a bad property manager can be more detrimental than you doing it yourself. We have mortgage and title services. Our mortgage, it's not our company, but they work with us closely. That's Terra Mortgage. That's Jason Hoare. He's part owner of HD8 Settlement, which we're owners of. That's Ian Hoover, Alex Deacon, and Jason Hoare owns a settlement company. We can do all closings for you. We can handle everything from the title search to insuring the title to facilitating the deal from start to finish, okay? And Jason can handle all your mortgage needs. So he can do anything from a commercial building to a single family home. FHA loans, conventional financing, commercial loans. So keep that in mind.
Isn't Tara the name of the plantation?
Tara is his wife's name.
Flying to the wind?
It could be, but that's his wife's name, that's why. Okay, ingredients, we're gonna zip through this real quick. Ingredients of a successful real estate investment career. I'm sure without a doubt that there are different methods to get to be successful in real estate. I'm just gonna share with you my ideas and my framework of how to be successful in this business. You have to raise your real estate IQ, meaning you have to educate yourself. You have to constantly be learning based. Know that you don't know everything. Once you realize that you think you know everything, you're in trouble. You really have to sit in the front?
Yeah.
This is Matt Stevens. He's my accountant, and he's been to these meetings before. Thank you for coming. And his children, and this lady here who I don't know. Okay, so you need to grow your real estate IQ. Super important. Know the market. How do you get to know the market? It's gonna take time. It's gonna take a lot of time. And know your limitations. So what I mean by that is, like, you just need to know what your limitations are. You need to know how much stress you can handle, how much financial risk that you can take, and that depends on where you are financially. And like, I take a lot more risks than somebody just starting out is going to take. It's just because I can, because I know what the risk factor is, and I manage that risk. So you have to build a team, you have to network, you have to have a coach or a mentor, and ultimately, what's the biggest reason most people fail in real estate? Does anybody? No one's going to get this, but does anybody want to try to take a stab?
They don't do their research.
That's a good one.
They have a bad accountant?
Oh, that's a real good one.
Underfunded.
Underfunded, that comes from a lender, of course.
Too much risk. They take on too much risk.
They procrastinate.
Yeah.
That's the biggest failure of anybody in any sort of business or anything at all, right? You procrastinate, you never do it. So the caveat is there, you have to look before you leap, but if you don't do anything, nothing's going to happen. So don't be afraid to fail. At some point, you can only accumulate so much knowledge, then you have to do something with it. So you have to act. You have to take action. So what I'm saying is take action, but do it in a risk management way. Okay? So take risks, but know your risks and know you're going to fail, and you're going to have to learn how to bounce back. What's the hardest thing about real estate? If you're a real estate investor, what do you think the hardest thing about real estate is? There's no wrong answers, but I'm gonna tell you what the hardest thing is, but I need some.
Determining a deal.
Determining what a good deal is? Mm-hmm. That's a good one. Yeah.
Reliable contractors.
Awesome. Yep. Good tenants. Mm-hmm. Those are all good. These aren't the number one, which I think is the number one. Any other ones?
Building a team.
Building a team. These are all key components. Yes, sir.
Finding good deals.
Finding good deals. There it is, brother. There it is. I didn't expect you to get that right. It's so true. If you can't find the good deals, it doesn't matter how much you know, how much money you have set aside to invest. So finding the deals is the hardest part about this business. That doesn't even go into account is what is a good deal. Most people can look at a house and they don't even know if it's a good deal. You know, well, what's a good deal? Well, how many days do you have for me to help you learn this stuff? That's a whole different situation, is what is a good deal, but finding the deal. So just to give you an example, and this is not a mathematical science, but you got to look at 1,000 properties, make offers on 50, and maybe you get a couple. Okay, So if you go out the first time and you have an agent and they show you 3 properties and you like all 3 and you want to buy all 3, you are not doing a good job. You need to probably stop what you're doing and start over. Because if you go out and look at 3 properties and you like all 3 and you want to buy them, something's wrong. Or your agent is like a superstar, which is just it's not likely. Yeah, so procrastination, opportunities, deals, at-bats, it's a numbers game, so you have to look at a lot of properties. Networking, building relationships, that's what you guys are doing here. So you should all have business cards, pass them out. There might be somebody sitting next to you that has a house that they don't want to do right now because maybe they have, like I have 10 projects going on right now, right? We have a couple that we just want to unload because we don't have the time or the energy or the capital or the resources to do it. So we're going to sell it, make a small profit, move on. There might be somebody sitting next to you that has that deal. That's a great deal for you, fits what you're looking for, but doesn't suit what they're looking for to do right now at this point in time. So you want to network with people in this room. Build your team. We talked about that. Slow it down, build your team, get a good accountant, a good lender, a good real estate agent. And Mark, who's going to talk today, Mark Wolper, is a lender, but he also is a real estate investor who's done hundreds of deals. So that's good when you're borrowing from somebody like that because that's a good team member to have on your team because they can help guide you through good and bad deals. He doesn't want to lend you money on a bad deal. He wants to lend you money on a good deal where he knows he's going to get paid, therefore you're going to make a profit. Leverage and time management, we talk about this all the time. There's only 168 hours in a week. After you factor in sleeping, eating, showering, brushing your teeth, going to work, traveling to and from work, sitting at the office, it leaves you maybe with 10 minutes at the end of the week. So you have to be able to leverage your time and money to its maximum capacity. Quickly, here's my story. I was a mechanic right out of high school, making about $36K a year. Oh, it's doing this automatic thing. Okay. We rented. We were just barely getting by. Does anybody do this? They have money going in and money going out. Does anybody can relate to that? Nothing in the bank, savings 0. Anybody? Oh, 2 in the back. Okay. My partner. That's not good. So I talked to the guy mechanic next to me and said, "Hey, what's going on? I'm buying real estate." I'm like, "Oh, cool. I want to buy real estate." "You're dumb. I can buy real estate then." I mean, So I started buying real estate, and I had no idea what I was doing. And he was a good lead into and exposed me to real estate, but he was a horrible mentor. In fact, he's out of the business. I bought my first property. My realtor was absolutely horrible. Wasn't her fault. It was her first deal. She was not a good agent. My first property, I had to have my 64-year-old mother help me paint it to pass FHA inspection. That's no lie. Bought a triplex. It was 2 furnaces died the first 3 months. I had nothing, and I needed to come up with $3,500, and so my home inspector was absolutely terrible. My home inspector was terrible. These furnaces today, when I look back on it, these things look like fire pits. That's how old they were. They were just nasty furnaces, and I can't believe he didn't condemn them, but they were atrocious. But thinking back, that's one of my team members. I hired a home inspector just out of the paper, and he was just horrible. So this is one of the problems when I talked about knowing knowing what your endurance is for risk and all this good stuff, knowing your limitations. One problem, the character flaw I have is I just want to go ahead and do it because I think I can. And you just keep digging that hole. And I kept digging and digging and buying and buying. And when I was buying in '93, they would lend money to anybody. If you had a pulse, you were getting a loan. So that's how easy it was. So I got my license, built my team of lenders, investment partners, accountants, contractors, attorneys. I went from making $36K a year to $200K. For me, that was like, wow. I didn't think anybody in the world made $200,000 except the president. And I was kicking some butt, but I was losing $50,000 a year on my rental properties. And I bought a new house and a new car, all that crap. So I was literally not doing well. I was in dire straits. So over years and years and years, I started over, sold some of the crappy properties. I still have some in my portfolio. Unfortunately, I had to sell some really good properties in order to pay for the crappy ones that I still owned that were over leveraged. So I couldn't sell the 3-unit that was losing $500 a month because it was only worth $90,000. I owed $100. I had to sell the good duplex that was worth $80, and I only owed $60 on it. I had to sell that so I could fund my habit.
You had to learn about
My
cash
real
flow.
estate habit, you know? Huh?
You had to learn about cash flow.
Had to learn about cash flow. I still have a little issue with that, but I'm getting better. So started over. I have well over 100 rentals now, and that's really not impressive. I know guys that own thousands, and they're very cash flow, good properties, but it's good enough for me. I'm proud of it. I went through the pains of learning and growing, and that's continually growing every year. And I do multiple flips each month. So the ingredients of a successful real estate investment career: at bats, real estate IQ, networking, building relationships, build your team, and come to my workshops. Okay, so we're going to jump into zero money down. What's another way of putting zero money down? What are you using to buy property?
Collateral.
What's that?
Collateral.
You can use collateral. Yep. But collateral means what?
Something that you, like, instead of an unsecured loan, it would be secured with something that was worth a good bit of money. It would allow you to get a mortgage.
And whose money is that?
Not mine.
Well, I would say it would have to be yours since you're applying for another loan.
No, that collateral, you're borrowing it though.
Oh,
You're using-
okay.
right? So you're getting that from another source.
Yeah, but let's say that you owned another house or something. You would use that collateral to protect your loan or secure your loan?
You could use that for collateral to secure a loan.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people don't have anything to use as collateral, right? But you're using, my point was, you're using other people's money. In this case, you're using the bank's money, right?
Yes.
So zero money down doesn't necessarily mean you're coming to the table with zero money down. What it means is you're borrowing all of the funds to do the transaction. Okay? Has anybody ever done any sort of creative financing deal here? What can you share just a little bit
I'm in the
about?
middle of one right now.
Mhm.
I have a private investor partner, and we're going in on some properties, and he's bankrolling the whole thing. We've worked out terms that are going to make sense, and hopefully we succeed.
Oh, okay, that's a good one because I don't have that as one of my. I like to keep it simple. There's probably, and Mark could probably expand on this because there's probably 10, 20, 50 different ways to make a deal happen. But it's really probably 3 fundamental, simple, easy ways that anybody can understand to make it happen. But that's a good one. So what he's done, so anybody who didn't hear, is he's partnered up with somebody who has the funding. So you guys are 50-50 partners, or?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, I mean, you could have different ratios there. It could be maybe 60-40, maybe he gets 40, the guy putting up the money gets 60, or vice versa. But he has somebody who can bankroll all the funds, so he's essentially buying with zero money down. But what's he giving up?
Probably hand.
He's giving up his time, he's giving up equity. Yeah, maybe control. Because I have also partners who want to do the money thing, and I'm okay with that, but I have to be in control because you're the money guy, I'm the knowledge, and I'll find the deals guy. So if that doesn't work, you have someone who, like that partnership can work really good, but you have to know what you're doing, and you guys have to know what each other's
Define the roles.
responsibility is. Exactly. You can't have that micromanagement thing, it just probably won't work out. So anybody else done? Yes.
Owner finance.
Okay, so how does that one work out for you?
Pretty much with that one, just negotiating a deal with the owner of the property and saying, like, putting $5,000 down and I'll pay $1,000 over so-and-so amount of months.
So that's a deal you're doing now, or you've done one?
In the process of.
Okay, and is that what you're doing, putting down $5,000? And how are you coming up with the $5,000?
Well, the $5,000 I've pretty much borrowed from either like Roth IRA
Okay,
type of thing.
that's awesome. Yeah, that's perfect example. Well, someone would look at you and say, Yeah, but that's not zero money down. You're putting down 5,000. But where did she get the 5,000? She borrowed it, like David was saying, collateral on another property. In this case, you're taking it from a credit card or from the 401k or whatever. Okay, maybe a rich uncle who lent you 5,000. It doesn't matter. It didn't come from you. Okay, that's good. Now the terms of that are. That's the other thing you need to think about is. Those terms are fantastic, right? She's putting very little down, actually zero, and you are renting it out to someone. So is it a single unit? Is it 10 units? What?
Duplex.
So it's a duplex. So the terms of that deal are really good. Who would take that deal?
I presume that she's renting it out.
Just one,
for-
two. I got two. I get three.
I presume she's renting it out
Three.
for more than her, is it $1,000 a month you're paying?
Yes,
So you can rent it for 1,200 maybe, or?
sir. $915 for one side, $915 on the other side.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's a really good deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I
on-
take it. I needed to get some numbers.
Yeah. So on paper, that works. I'd have to look at it. I'd have to look at the deal, the location, the upside, the downside. You know, the long-term upside, the long-term downside, the short-term returns, all that stuff. And to define whether it was a good deal for me. So a good deal for me might not be a good deal for you and vice versa, you know? And good deal, so it just, a good deal, it just depends what a good deal is. It varies. But that sounds awesome, so congratulations to you on that one. I bought 4 units. I called up the gentleman, this was back when I first started. I put 5,000 down and I basically borrowed that from a credit card. So he held the mortgage, put $5,000 down. It wasn't a good deal because the 4 unit was a disaster. But what was good in that deal?
Your educational experience? or-
That's true. That was valuable, very valuable. The good thing was the terms. The terms are great.
Okay.
The deal sucked. Terms are good. Sales price was deplorable. It should have been probably 20,000 less than what I paid, which was 65. Yes, sir.
Alex, I was gonna ask, if your income shows that you're eligible for a certain amount of a mortgage payment, why does that lending institution still require money down? If you make enough money to make your payment, why do they need money down?
It's all about risk. It's all about risk
What
for the
happens-
bank.
Yeah, but what happens if the unit that you buy is worth what you paid for it? In other words, it wasn't ballooned, or it was, let's say it was appraised at $100,000 and you bought it for $100,000.
Right.
And your income allowed you to buy that, and you qualified to make the mortgage payment.
Yeah,
Why do they still require money done?
it's all about. They didn't 10 years ago, right? 12 years ago, and further back, and that's why we got into that mortgage crash.
But then here again, if you go and you put $5,000 on a credit card for the down payment, you borrowed money and you're borrowing money again. Do they look at that as a no-no, or?
You're usually not getting traditional financing though. Yeah, you're borrowing the money and you're doing something creative with the owner.
It
Yeah.
has to be through an owner and not through a.
Doesn't have to be, but you have to be financially pretty astute and very strong and have a good relationship with the bank in order to borrow your down payment in order for them to fund the rest. So that's just, okay?
It's because the value of the real estate can go down below
Yeah.
what it's valued at now, so.
Yeah, and
it may be
and that in
maybe
short
20%.
is risk for the bank, so, okay? All right, so it's not rocket science, so keep it simple. So what irritates me to the nth degree is too many of these trainers and some of these local real estate groups. They always bring in these people who can do these trusts, and they can bring in these attorneys who know how to structure a deal this way and make it complicated. It's really not. There's 3, and maybe Mark can expand on this when he comes up here, but the 3 that I think of are owner financing, which that's the one you're doing, okay? So she is putting $5,000 down. The seller now is going to be the lender, right? Because you're going to take title in your name?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now the seller, does the seller have a mortgage on it?
It's
Okay.
completely paid off.
Seller owns it free and clear. Seller's now the bank. So the bank terms are, can you share those terms with us?
I forgot how much how many months we agreed on, but it's pretty much $1,000 a month for it, and the other part is the 5%, like $5, 5,000 down.
What's the percentage rate you're paying him though, interest wise? Is it like?
No.
Okay, so you're just paying him a flat $1,000 every month. What did you pay for the property?
The sales price was 100,000.
100,000. So every month your balance drops $1,000. Okay, and do you pay it for 100 months, or is there? That's really good terms there, because typically you might be at an interest rate of say 8%, and you're paying a portion of that loan goes towards interest, portion goes towards principal. Then after 3 years or 2 years or 20 months, whatever the negotiated period is, you have a balloon payment. So if you continue making those payments after year 2, on the 24th month, you have to pay that gentleman off. So you'd have to secure other financing to pay him off. Does anybody understand that? That's called a balloon payment. Yes, sir.
What happens if you can't secure financing? Do you lose the property?
Well, it depends. Yeah. Typically, no. You'd probably work something out with the lender. Hey, man, I'm trying, but I can't. How about if I continue making payments for another year?
Okay.
Because I had to do that before, and they were like, yeah, what other option I have is I have to foreclose on you, which can be very expensive and take a lot of time to do. Okay? So it's not rocket science. So one of them is owner financing. Another is, that's probably the least risky, owner financing, because the owner has to foreclose on you to take the property back. I mean, there's certain instruments that he can implement, or he or she can implement, that'll make it easier for them to get the property back, but essentially that's probably the least risky for you. More risky, but very little risk regardless, is called a lease option. So if we used your scenario where you were just she was putting down $5,000, and that's called your option money. So that's that is a down payment, but it's called option money. So after that $5,000, after a year or 2 years or whatever the time period is, she can lose that money if she options not to buy the property. So how can she buy the property after leasing it for 2 years? How would she be able to buy that property?
If she generates income, then she's lendable. She could finance it traditionally and
Yep.
buy it like that.
Yep, finance it with traditional lending. So that's the key here, is you get in with zero money. In her case, she borrowed it all, but it's the same premise. And after 2 years, if that's the agreement, like Ian and I just did a lease option on a duplex in Avalon. We sold it for $60,000. The gentleman put down $6,000. He pays us $558 a month. We base that on a certain calculation. $558 a month. At the end of 1 year, he owes us basically $60,000. So after 1 year, he has to go and refinance, get the cash, and buy us out. If after that year he says, I can't do it, then we're probably going to extend it. What other option do we have? But it's real easy to say, hey, bud, hit the road or else, because it's just a lease option now. So he's just essentially a tenant. So essentially I'm evicting him versus foreclosing. So you see the difference? Why a lease option is more risky for the buyer than owner financing, because the method to get you out of the deal and get you out of the way is basically an eviction versus a foreclosure. So what would you rather have? Would you rather have owner financing in a perfect world, or a lease option?
Owner financing with no money down.
Yes. Hello. David.
I was gonna ask, what did he benefit by lease payment for 1 year, then going and applying for the mortgage? What did he accomplish for 1 year?
He bought another duplex from us. Okay, so he went and got. Hey, Ian, did he get owner finance, or did he get bank financing on that other duplex on Florence? Private financing. So the benefit was our terms were really good for him, so he only had to put 10% down, and it enabled him, it gave him a year to rehab this property because it needed a lot of work. It's probably worth, after total rehab and re-rented, it's probably worth $130,000. But it's going to take 30 to 40 in rehab. So for him, the benefit was he had no bank costs, no bank fees whatsoever. It was a quick closing, and he only had to put 10% down. Then after a year, what he'll do is he'll go to the bank and say, hey, guess what? I have this property. It's worth $130,000. I only owe $60,000. It's going to appraise for $130,000. He'll be able to get all that money and possibly even cash out, right? They might lend him 80% of $130,000.
Creative financing, right?
Yeah, so he might be able to actually get all of his money back, including purchase price and rehab. Okay? So lease option. And then another way is taking over payments. So if someone, like on your deal, he doesn't have a loan, right? But if he did have a loan, you can step in and take over his payments. That's done all the time. The downside of that is there's what's called a due on sales clause, which if the lender finds out that the borrower, which is not you, it's the guy selling you the property, is letting someone else take over the payments, they might, and now it's titled in their name, it can become an issue. It's normally not, but taking over payments is an option, okay? Taking over payments can be an option. So the pros and cons of creative financing. The pros are pretty easy to understand. What are the cons? What's the downside of owner financing, of creative financing? Can anybody guess or think of some?
You're not building your own credit and credit score because most of the creative financing options aren't going to report to the credit agencies.
Good. That's a good one. Hoover, are you listening?
Yeah.
What was the question?
What's the downfall of creative financing?
Yeah.
See, I am listening.
What is it? What is the downside?
Horrible terms. Most of the time.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. You got lucky this time. It's you lose your ability. It's not all the time, but your ability to negotiate is drastically reduced because you're asking for. You can ask for whatever you want, but to get the lowest price possible and the best terms with 0% interest and blah blah blah, all the best of the best. Every time you add a layer of risk for the seller, you're creating you're just creating less leverage that you have that you can negotiate. Does that make sense? So if you had cash, let's say I'm going to buy a property and you're going to buy the same property, and I offer cash and it's $100,000. I'll give you $98,000 cash closed in 3 weeks as is, and you come in and say, I'll give you $98,000, but I want you to hold the mortgage. I'm going to put $2,000 down. I'll make payments to you, and if I don't make payments, you have to foreclose. How's that sound? What are you going to take as a seller?
The cash.
99% of the time. Sometimes the creative financing will actually be beneficial, but the seller selling it has to be in the right financial place to want to take those terms. So when I'm selling a property, I look at the person borrowing or buying it. So for example, we did that lease option with the gentleman, so $6,000 down is not a whole lot. I mean, you know, we could spend that much in him not paying rent and hiring an attorney to evict him and all that stuff. It's really not that much. The beauty of that deal is this gentleman is very well off, and he has a very good job, and he has a track record with us. So if you're borrowing money from Mark, who's a hard money lender, your first deal, he's going to put you through hell, most likely, because he wants to protect his assets. Then the next deal, then every deal, you build that relationship and you show that you can do deals and make profit and pay him back, then things loosen up. So that's why I was able to put that deal together. If it was somebody I didn't know on that duplex I'm talking about, I would have probably wanted more money down, or I actually would have wanted to see their financials. I would want to act like a bank and go through the process of auditing how much money they make and looking at their financials. You know, how much experience do they have? That makes a difference to a bank. in a lot of cases is how much experience do you have in doing what I do? So it kind of snowballs because the ability to get capital will become easier and easier as you become more experienced and your credit score is higher and your debt to income ratio is lower and your income increases. It becomes easier to borrow money. So the three that I thought of was owner financing, lease option. Those are the two most common. Taking over payments. You had mentioned partnering up with someone who has money, so that's good too because it's essentially a hybrid. You're coming up with money to buy the property, but it's not your money. But what you're giving is part ownership, but still zero money down. So yeah, the only con that I can think of, the only downside of creative financing is you do lose some leverage on negotiating a better deal. The pros are obviously you can buy anything with zero money down. So how does somebody who has virtually no money in the bank do their first deal? That lady stepped out with her daughter, but she would have been able to help us.
Some type of creative financing through the seller.
Yeah, how do you do your first deal though? I mean,
Hard money,
hard money's a way.
if you have income. And
Yeah.
You can basically pay interest only for the year.
That's a good answer, and I'm going to tell you why that segues into what I'm going to say is hard money is an answer, but a lot of questions I get that posed to me is like, hey, my credit score sucks, I barely make enough money to survive, I'm behind on my house payment now, I'll just go get a hard money loan. There's not many hard money lenders that are going to lend to you. Why?
Because you can't, I mean, it's.
It looks like
it's
you're
their money.
overextended already without it.
Yeah, hello. So that's going to be tough to get a loan. So what you have to do is turn around and look at yourself and say, would I lend to me? That's probably a first question. Am I going to lend to me? Hell no, I'm not going to lend to me. And why would he lend to me? So yeah, it becomes more difficult. It's not impossible though. Like I was going through the scenario in my head this morning. If you're super wealthy and financially independent, it's going to be very easy for you to get other people's money to fund your deals, right? Because who wouldn't want to lend you money? Why you wouldn't use your own is another question. But you got that person here, and then you have the person that we just talked about with a 500 credit score just getting by and is behind on their mortgage payment, and they're asking to borrow money. It's not likely, but it can be done at that level. So that level, how you would do it is you find what the woman back there found is someone who's willing to hold a mortgage, and you come up with $5,000 down. So where'd the $5,000 come from? I'm sure you guys, you could find that $5,000 somehow. You can always go to rob a 7-Eleven, right? I don't know how much money they'd have in their safe, but probably not enough. You'd have to rob like 5 of them maybe. You could, kiss up to a rich relative, maybe, play your cards right. Maybe get a credit card. If your credit's really bad, it's going to be hard to do that. But if your credit's bad, you can go to a credit repair person. That credit repair person can help you get your credit score up in 6 months or less. And then you can start with a small credit card, then go to a bigger credit card. So it might take you a year just to get the availability to have some sort of credit card that has cash on it that you can use to buy your next product or property, to fund your next deal. So it's not impossible. Just you might have to wait a year or two and take the proper steps to position yourself to be enabled to get some sort of loan so you could put money down. And does that make sense? Yes, sir.
You might buy a duplex and live in half of it and rent out the other half.
Yeah, I love it. I love that's for your first investment.
Yeah.
Buying a multifamily 1, 2, 3 unit, I think even up to 4 units, and living in 1 unit, managing it, doing all the repairs, living there probably for free because the other 3 units or 2 units or 1 unit is going to pay your mortgage. But the challenge there is still going to have to get a loan for that.
Right.
Yeah.
You
But
find-
it's the way to start.
You just find the right deal. It's all about the right deal. If the seller's motivated enough to sell
Yep.
and work out that owner financing, you could possibly do it with no money down.
Exactly. But what's the hardest part about this business?
Finding the right deal.
Yeah.
You also
Yeah.
could wholesale it to get some down payment.
Finding the right deal, period.
Is there a reason you capped your example at 4 units when you were talking about multi-units?
Residential?
Yeah, it fudges with the loan when you go over 4 units,
Okay.
and that might even have changed now. It used to be a lot looser.
It's still 4.
Is
But
it?
if you're doing owner financing or creative financing.
Owner financing doesn't matter. Even commercial, when you go to a commercial loan, like when you have an LLC or some sort of entity,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter how many units it is. It's now a commercial loan.
Right.
So that changes the whole. That
Rules.
changes how they look at the deal. Okay, how they audit it and everything.
And from a bank standpoint, when it comes to traditional lending, anything 4 units and under is residential. So you could take out traditional 30-year mortgages on that most of the time. Anything 5 and up is commercial. No matter-
But you have to live in the unit.
You don't have to. There's mortgage companies out there that will lend to you as a residential 4-unit triplex or a quadplex,
Okay.
and it's zoned residential.
Right.
You just have to find.
You
the
have to
funds.
put down 20% though. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you can only own so many of those, right?
Right.
That's
I think it's up, at least when I left the bank from a traditional standpoint, I think it was, you can't have any more than 10, or maybe it was 8, but.
Yeah,
in
there's
your
a limit.
portfolio, yeah.
But see, no, good point. But you're not going to buy. Maybe you buy your first one in your personal name, but
Yeah.
as you grow, you're going to want to limit your exposure to risk by buying everything in an LLC, right? So once you do that, it's all commercial, and there's no limits on how big you can get or how small you have to be. All right, so we're going to take maybe just 7-8 minute break. We're going to get Mark set up, and Mark he's going to go over his background, but has a wealth of knowledge in the lending part of real estate. Pittsburgh native, flips properties to this day, and could pick his brain and ask him a lot of questions too. And I'll chime in and ask you some questions, Mark, and
Okay.
we'll learn a lot. So come back in like 7-8 minutes and we'll get started.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Mark Wolper. I own a company called Investors Deal LLC. And before I get into what we do and how we do it, I want to give you a little bit of a background of me because I think it's important and relates to how I do things. So I'm local. I grew up in the east suburbs, went to Penn State University, traveled around for 13 years after college with a consumer products company. And then I spent the last 15 years back in Pittsburgh in the real estate business. So I started in 2002 as an owner of a title and appraisal company. And my timing was really good because the boom was taking off. So I learned a lot about real estate in that capacity. In 2006, I sold my interest because I really wanted to do things by myself where I didn't have employees. So the main thing I wanted to do, and I'd learned about it through the title world, was private money lending. You know, I also wanted to get involved in flipping and owning income-producing real estate, which I'd really started. Since then, I've added purchasing financial instruments, so that's primarily mortgages. There's a whole marketplace where you can buy existing mortgages on secondary markets. So the reason I think it's important that you know that is most of you are going to look at me as a lender, and that's how you should look at me. But I'm also going to be somebody that fleshes out deals with you. And I'm going to do it as a service to you, whether or not you ever borrow my money if we're talking about a deal. But I'm also going to do it as a service to me, because nobody cares about your deal working out as much as I do. And now, no offense to a guy like Alex or Ian, but they get paid at the transaction. So you buy a piece of investment real estate, they've guided you, they're paid, and they'd like it to go well for you, but they're paid. If the deal goes bad, you're not going to get a refund. I don't think anyway, are they, Alex? Yeah. So the problem is if I enter as the funder and I'm involved in part of the deal, and the deal goes bad, paying me becomes a struggle. I may end up having to take a property back, which is not what I want. I don't go through all of this to own your property. I go through all of this to collect interest and make money. So I'm going to, whether you want me to or not, if we do business, I'm going to be your advisor and your consultant, because the bottom line is I'm not going to allow you to borrow my company's money on a deal that's super high risk, not profitable enough, or generally inappropriate for you. And what I mean by inappropriate for you is if you come to me and your first deal is you're buying a 5,000 square foot mansion in Crafton for $10,000 and it's about to fall over, and you're going to spend $250,000 to renovate it, that's probably not a deal I'm going to get involved, and likely not a deal you should get involved with as your first deal, because it's calculus 5 and you need to be doing math 1 is probably the best way I can say it. So let's get into private lending in general. So you're going to hear private lending under several terms: hard money, soft money, private lending, rehab lending, and people might say, what are the differences? And I'll tell you, there are no differences. They're just different terms for the same thing. So I call it private lending. I don't like the term hard money. It makes it seem like if you don't pay, someone's going to break your kneecaps, and that's certainly not going to be the case. So what it is, regardless of what you call it, is non-bank lending on investment property, and that's capitalized because it has to be not owner-occupied property. And the reason for that is once you start lending on owner-occupied property in any volume, more than 1 or 2, you need special licensing and requirements, and most hard money lenders don't want to do that. Tons of compliance. It would cost you a fortune to be compliant with all state and federal regulations, go through their audits. You have limits as to what you can charge, how you need to converse with people. So most private lenders are going to stick to investment property, commercial loans. So these fall into 4 major categories. So today we've talked a little bit about fix and flip loans. Okay, so fix and flip, I think everyone knows what it is. Basically, you're going to buy a property, you're going to fix it up, you're going to create equity, sell the property, and make a profit. So most companies are going to lend on an after repaired value, and they'll lend up to, say, let's say 70% of that. So an after repaired value, lending on that means we're not going to appraise the property you're buying today. We're going to appraise what you say the property is going to be. So you find some little ranch out in Plumboro, and the roof leaks, and the floors are stained with pet mess and everything else, and who knows what that property's worth. But you say, I'm going to do new flooring, you're going to give me a whole list. I'm going to paint, I'm going to do lighting, a new roof, windows, we're going to coat the driveway, we're going to tune up the landscaping, we're going to redo the electric, and so on. What's this property going to be worth? That's pretty easy to find out in this market because a lot of other people have done it. Or maybe some homeowners just keep their house updated and immaculate. So we're going to look and say, that property is going to be worth about $140,000 once you're done. And we're going to lend you, let's say, 70% of that. So we're going to lend you $98,000. You can use that $98,000 towards acquisition, toward soft costs, your closing costs, and towards your renovation. So that's why a hard money lender is super useful on a deal like that. A bank, go to the bank and say, I'm going to buy a decrepit house in Plumboro, and explain it to them and let their appraiser see it. And say, but I'm getting a great deal, I'm only paying $25,000 for it, and there's going to be a lot of profit. The best they're going to tell you is, we'll lend you a function of that $25,000, and that's it. In the end, they probably won't even lend you that, but for a little bit, they'll tell you that they're going to, I believe. So that's why a hard money person is useful, and that's why people will pay well above bank rates, because we're going to allow you to buy that place, fix it up, and make a profit. And a traditional lender most certainly is not going to do that. You're going to get rehab funds and draws, so you're going to close. You're going to go out and start fixing up the property, and the lender's going to give you money as you fix up the properties based on the schedule. And typically, once the house sells, you pay the loan off in full. You've been making interest payments all along, but the loan's going to be due usually in 1 year. Different hard money lenders, private lenders have different criteria, but it's usually 1 year, the money's due no matter what. Or if you sell the house before that, which you should, it'll be due in full then. Second type of loan doesn't have a cool name like fix and flip. It's stabilize and refinance. You might say, hey, I'm not a flipper. I want to build a rental portfolio. How can I use your money? Same deal. You might find a single family home. Could be a duplex, a triplex, and it's a mess. Bank's not going to lend on it. No one lives in it, so there's no income. It's in bad condition, so a bank doesn't like it as collateral really at any value. So we're going to lend you the money the same way. We're going to look and see, what's this thing going to be worth once it's fixed up and once it's rented. Again, the data's out there as far as what your rents will be, what other people have sold comparable units for. So we're going to say what's it going to be worth, and we're going to lend you a function of that. So you're going to spend your time stabilizing the property physically, means fixing it up. You're going to get the property rented with good leases. And then you're going to go to your traditional lender and you're going to say, now I've got a good property that cash flows. I'd like to borrow money to pay off my private loan. And maybe there's some equity you can gather there, but maybe not. You might be just going from a loan that's due in a year that has a $1,000 payment to a loan that's for 30 years that has a $500 payment. So you don't have the deadline, and of course your cash flow is going to increase once you go to the bank. Third type of loans that I do, and I'm probably doing these in rank order based on the quantity of loans that we do, is quick closing. And it's almost without fail, and if there's any bankers here or traditional lenders, I apologize, a bank left somebody on the altar. They told them, I'm going to do the loan, we're going to do the loan, it looks really good, and you're going to jump through hoop after hoop after hoop after hoop, and the closing date's going to come, and the banker's going to say to you at some point, I'm really sorry, but underwriting has turned it down. There's a new requirement, or we didn't know of this requirement, and you're going to have a great deal you need to rescue. You're going to have a seller that says, hey, you're on the clock, you have a deadline. You're going to need to rescue that deal. You're going to need to find somebody that closes quickly, and that's probably going to be a private lender. So for example, if you come to me and you have an appraisal, your title work is done, you've got an LLC, it's formed, and everything is ready to go, somebody like me is going to be able to close that loan in about 48 hours. So you're typically going to be able to rescue your deal. And then the next category is what I would say is other. And so other can be anything. So some ideas are transactional fundings. You want to buy a house, maybe it came from a wholesaler who's collecting a fee. Your long-term lender is not going to allow your wholesaler to get paid a fee, so you come to a hard money guy, you do one full legal legitimate closing with your hard money guy where your wholesaler gets paid, and then immediately then you go do a bank refinance right after. Very creative, happens all the time. You might have something that's non-financeable for the most part, like raw land that you're interested in. You might want a credit line, a line of credit secured by investment real estate. That's a very hard product to find from banks. You can get it on your own house, but typically not investment real estate. So a hard money guy might say, hey, you have a duplex. There's no mortgage on it. We say it's worth $150,000. We'll give you $100,000 as a line of credit that you can draw on as you need. You can do whatever you want with it. Hopefully, you're using it to increase your portfolio and something that will appreciate and create income and not going to Best Buy on a shopping spree. Another thing we do is sometimes a bridge between bank loans. I've had people that have gotten a technical default on a bank loan and then didn't handle it well. So what I mean by technical default is in that big stack of papers you sign when you get a bank loan, you're agreeing to lots of things. And one of them is you're going to keep your taxes paid. Now maybe you don't pay your property taxes for whatever. In the case I'm thinking of, my guy was just a mess. He was too disorganized and always thinking about the next thing and wasn't taking care of the little things. Ironically, he had plenty of money to pay the property taxes, didn't. 4 or 5 years later, the taxes are huge. The bank says to him, we want you to pay it. He gets a little bit arrogant and says, hey, I'm paying you, so don't worry about anything else. And the bank says, what do you mean don't worry about anything else? You agreed you were going to do it. In fact, we're going to call the loan on you. So we want all of our money now, which they have the right to do. So this was also the type of guy who likes to show a loss in his income tax returns. So he goes to another bank, hey, I need you to refinance me out of this bank's loan. And they're like, wait, they called the loan on you and you show a loss in your tax return. We don't care what your collateral is. We're not interested. Well, I cared a lot what his collateral was. It was 2 apartment buildings in Squirrel Hill. He owed about $1 million on the 2 combined. They were worth about $2.5 million combined. So that was a loan my company jumped in and did. I was more than happy to look past his sins because if they continued and he defaulted, I'd love to have owned the apartment buildings. I'd have made far more than I would have as lending him on it. And he needed a year to get his credit back in order, show what he really made on his tax returns, get that other loan behind him. And then a small lender stepped up, a traditional bank lender, and took me out. But he was going to lose the property. He needed a bridge to get him between the bank loans because he was faulty. So next comes underwriting. And so You go to a bank and they talk about underwriters, and it's a private department that you really don't talk to, and you don't understand what's going on, and it seems like the rules change from minute to minute. And let me stop for 1 second. Anyone taking pictures of the screen, you don't need to, because you can take my card, and if you request it, I will email you the entire presentation, and then you'll have it. And also Alex has it as well, and he'll email you the entire presentation, so don't worry about that. I just didn't give everyone handouts because then people are trying to read, and it doesn't seem like you quite have their attention. So anyway, when you try to borrow money from me, I am your underwriter. So there's no secretive department, there is no new set of rules that pop up every day or anything like that. So when you come to me, the first thing I'm going to say to you immediately is, I need to know the address of the property you're considering, what you plan to pay, because this might be something you don't have under agreement yet, so you're not sure what you're going to pay, but what you plan to pay, what you estimate you're going to spend on rehab. I don't expect you to have a list yet. Expect you to say, I think it needs $50,000. A simple application that I'll provide for you, and bring me a credit report. I can pull your credit, but that costs me money and costs you credit score points if I pull your credit. You can go to Credit Karma, get your own credit report for free. It doesn't hurt your credit score, and you can send it to me. So everybody takes that route. I'm going to then probably ask you a couple questions, but then give you the outline of a deal. And I'm going to say, okay, hopefully, this looks like it's going to work. We're going to lend you this much. So it means you're going to need this much for closing, and this much might be zero, this much might be 5,000, or this much might be 40,000, depends on your deal. If you like, and this is what it's going to cost you. It's going to be this many points, and this is going to be your interest rate. Okay? So then you can go back and firm up your purchase, right? Because you kind of have a financier that says they're going to do it. You know what your financing costs are, so that can work into your model so that you understand if your deal's still going to work and how good it's going to be. So now you're going to go in and you're going to get a deal. You're going to get the property under agreement. So you're going to come back to me. You're going to give me a sales agreement. You're going to give me a full rehab list. If it's the first deal we did together, we're going to walk through the property together to make sure that is a full rehab list. You're going to tell me, you're going to show me a proof of income. I'm not going to ask you for 5 years tax returns. I'm going to ask you maybe for 1 year's tax returns, your W-2. And I need to make sure you're going to have an interest payment. I need to make sure I know where the money's coming from. You may say, hey, I'm a real estate investor. I make my money in big chunks a couple times a year. I understand that, but it needs to be on the tax return. You may say, I'm a real estate investor. I make my money in big chunks, and I have a fantastic accountant, and he somehow manages to show I make no money every single year. And I'm going to say, then we're going to take that money that you made, and we're going to put it in an escrow account, and we're going to draw the interest payments off of you, because clearly, you know, we need to make sure there's an accurate and documented way that I'm going to get paid. Okay, so we're going to go through that. Then phase 3, right before closing, you're going to give me an actual draw schedule. So you're going to take the rehab list and you're going to break it down in the order you'd like your money. And I'm going to tell you, hey, you have $50,000 in renovations. Give me 5 draws of $10,000 each. That's flexible. If your windows are back ordered, but your roof guy comes and shows up early, we're going to be able to juggle that money around. You're going to need builder's risk insurance, and without boring anybody, that's the right insurance to buy when you're renovating a house. A regular homeowner's or landlord's policy does not cover a house that's under renovation. And you're going to give me your bank account information because we're going to draft your interest payments. We don't collect checks or anything like that. We draft your payments monthly. So that's how the deal's going to work in the phases. But what's going on in my mind, like what I consider and how I underwrite. One, I'm going to consider your collateral. So that's the property you're going to buy, which is most likely what you're securing the loan with. I'm going to consider a couple things about your collateral. One, where is it? I don't want to lend money in neighborhoods that are not primarily owner occupied. The reason for it is if you go to purchase a property, and I'm just going to pick a neighborhood, and maybe it is or isn't the right neighborhood. I'll say Dravosburg, because there's probably a good chance no one here is from Dravosburg. It's kind of an obscure community. And say, I want to buy a house there. Well, Dravosburg is, are you really from Dravosburg?
I'm a landlord.
Exactly. Dravosburg is primarily owned by landlords, and it's primarily renters there. And the fact is, the streets in the neighborhood do not look as good as Monroeville, that is primarily owner-occupied. That's just a fact. The issue is, if your deal fails in Dravosburg and I end up owning that property, the market for me to sell that property is extremely thin. I'm going to sell to an investor who's probably going to have to be a cash investor, and he's going to kill me. No matter what we think that property is worth, he will pay me less. And Alex knows a lot of the people that would be buying in Dravosburg and what they would do to me. The long and short of it is, almost all of my investment would be gone. However, if it were in Monroeville and I've managed things properly, I have a pretty good chance of coming out of this deal even, maybe even a little bit better. I'm going to consider your plan and experience. So if it's your first deal, we're really going to grind it out and make sure the plan's good. But even if it's not your first deal, I want to see your plan, and it needs to be organized. And think of it as a business plan. And if it's a mess and it's on a napkin and you've missed huge things, I'm sitting at my desk thinking, this person kind of doesn't have their act together. But if it's tight, there's a worksheet and it's there, and not that it would need to be color-coded or anything like that, but it's color-coded, and there's a contingency, and you can tell it's well thought out and organized. Well, obviously I'm thinking a little bit better of you as a borrower, and I'm thinking better of your deal. I consider your income, and we've touched base on that. I have to get paid, and that's got to come from somewhere. And I'm going to consider your credit score, and I put that last for a reason. I've seen 650 credit scores where I said, I can't believe it's so low. I'd lend to this person in a minute. I see no issues. I've seen 650 credit scores where I say, I don't know how it's 650. This person's a deadbeat and pays nobody. I have no idea. So the formula by which they calculate credit scores is a bit of a mystery to everybody. And sometimes you get uneven things. So people say, what's your minimum credit score? And I don't have one. The fact is, if you're a 520, unless you come to me with a $300,000 house in Squirrel Hill that you're somehow buying for 50 grand, I'm probably not that interested, because at 520, you probably haven't ever paid anybody. If you're 820, I'm pretty impressed. But in the middle, if you're 650, am I lending to you? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Depends on your deal and the content of your credit. So I'm going to underwrite this deal by the equity in the deal. Lots of ways you can get equity. The first way you should always be trying is to buy the property right. You buy it cheap enough, you're creating your own equity. Adding value. After you buy it, you're going to renovate the property. Obviously, it's going to add value. You don't want dollar for dollar. You want to be spending the right amount and doing the right things. At $50,000 in expenses creates $90,000 in increased value. Some people like a deal a lot more than me, and we go back and forth, and I don't see the value, and they do have the money, and they say, I'll just put in the money for the difference because I know in the end I'm going to make money. Yeah, that works too. And so we touch base kind of on the other things. We want better neighborhoods with owner-occupants, an organized and well-thought-out plan. After repair value. So a couple things to note, because that's an important figure when I'm calculating how much I'm going to lend you. I'll probably ask you where you got your after repaired value, and you may say to me, my realtor gave it to me. So if it's a guy like Alex, I'm going to be pretty sure that that's a pretty good number because he's an investor and he gets it. I've seen from some of the bigger companies after repaired values that are just mind-blowing. And I'll say, well, where did the number come from? Have them send me the comps because I certainly could have missed something. And they'll send me the comps, and they might be in the general neighborhood, but they've ignored all the comps on the street that are significantly lower. And this is a realtor that just wants you to buy a house and then probably wants to be your realtor when you sell the house, and they're going to make commission twice and don't care that much how you're going to make. Well, I have multi-list access. I'm going to sit down and grind out the number as well. I'm willing to look at other things, but typically your evidence for your after repaired value is going to be double checked by me. I'm going to come up with an after repaired value because it's super important. I don't want you in a deal that you're not going to make what you think you're going to make, and I don't want to be lending where we don't really have equity. I rarely require an appraisal. It's going to save you $400 or $500. The times I do require an appraisal, there are pretty much two of them. If you want to do a deal in the boondocks, you want to say, I'm going to be in Butler County, but there's a real cool woodsy area and it's nice and there's a market for houses there. That's really hard to value properties. I'm going to hire a professional. If you tell me you want to be in a plan somewhere in Allegheny County, it's pretty easy to value properties. We won't need an appraisal. The second time is maybe we just don't agree. and I'm going to say I see this as a $150,000 house because of these comps, and you say I see it as a $180,000 house because of these comps, and I'm like, well, I kind of see your point, but I'm good with 150, and you say, well, I really want to do the deal, and I think you're wrong. What I'm going to say is, okay, let's hire an appraiser. We'll go with the appraisal's number. You know, I'll put my money where my mouth is. You do the same, and we'll have a professional give us an opinion of value. So next things, what has to happen? You know, what must I have for a loan? One, property needs to be non-owner occupied. We discussed why. Two, a viable exit strategy. So a viable exit strategy to me is either I'm going to resell this house, and there's a plan to get it there, or I'm going to refinance this house. Now, if you say I'm going to refinance this house, I'm going to underwrite it a little bit more closely because I need to make sure you are really going to be bankable at the end of this transaction, you personally and financially. So I have some friends who are bankers and mortgage brokers, and they tell me like what to look for, debt to income, and some of the more technical things that frankly I probably don't do on the private loan, because I don't want to get to the end of the year and you say, Mark, I thought I could refinance this rental property. I cannot. Will you extend? I'm probably going to extend, but the problem is in a rental property, you're going to make this much and I'm going to make all the rent. And while it seems great for me, I've been around long enough to know the deal needs to work for everybody. And how long do you want to own and operate a rental property and deal with all the headaches where I make all the money and you make none of the money? Probably not very long. So I need to make sure at the time we do our loan, you're either bankable then or really close to bankable. I find that people that are a disaster, that have never taken care of anything, that say, oh, in a year I'm going to be fine, they're probably not going to be fine in a year. You know, something in the last 40 years has led them to be a disaster. That's likely not going to change in that year, so I'm not going to take that leap of faith. But if you say, hey, I was out of town, I missed a credit card, the bill honestly never showed up, I never paid it, something like that, and my credit score is going to bounce up a few points from that. Like, I get stuff like that. Like, life happens, and it's one of the advantages to talking to the person that's going to underwrite your loan. You know, you have a chance to explain the situation and a little bit back and forth. I must have a first position mortgage. And then I put in there 99% of the time. And the reason I want a first position mortgage is if I have a second position mortgage and you don't pay me and I have to take the property, I also get that first position mortgage with it, which I have to pay off before I could ever sell the property, which effectively means I'm on the hook for that amount. So I might as well have lent it and collected interest on it anyway. The times I might do a second, let's say there's a tremendous amount of equity. You have a $200,000 property and a $20,000 mortgage you've paid down, and you said, hey, I want to keep that mortgage. It's at a really low rate. Would you lend me $50,000 behind it? Yeah, that I would probably do if there's a tremendous amount of equity. I need the information to collect your interest payments electronically. I have a fairly large portfolio of loans, and it's just me. I can't wait for checks and call people. I go out and debit everybody's account the same day every month. The interest is there or it's not. And the other thing I need to have is title insurance. And the reason that's important is people say, well, you finance from the sheriff's sale or a tax sale property. And I say, well, in theory I would, but it's probably not insurable yet from a title point of view. So when you buy a property at a tax sale or a sheriff's sale, you usually don't even get your deed for a number of weeks. Certainly no one's going to insure the title of a property you don't have the deed to. There are usually debts that either need to get paid and satisfied or wiped off, and all of that takes time. So that's a very hard thing for a hard money lender or any lender to finance on because of the inability to get title insurance. So that's where a line of credit might come in. You might say, hey, I want to buy it sheriff sales and tax sales. I know you can't finance, but I have a property that's worth $100,000. Could I get a line of credit in case I get something at a sheriff sale? I'll say, yeah, I'll give you $70,000, and when you get something, you use that money to pay for it, and I know I'm protected by your main piece of collateral.
Have you ever had to file a claim against title insurance?
So I've never had to file a claim against title insurance as a lender, but having been in the business, there's one thing I know. Title insurance companies never pay claims. Never. It's the best business in the world. They collect premiums, and if an agent made a mistake and there's actually a problem with the title, they go to the agent and say, you have error and omissions insurance, use that or write a check or we're suing you. So it's not it's not realistically possible to ever get money from an underwriter, but what you do know is the title has been searched, the I's have been dotted, the T's have been crossed, and that you can pretty much bank on having a clear title. I'd say 99.999% of the time when the title policy is issued, there's nothing to file a claim on anyway, because the people that issue the policies are pretty well trained and regulated, and they know what they're doing. I think a lot of people sit here and say, what are the costs of hard money? And I'm not going to tell you today, because I charge differently almost on every deal. I might have 40 deals in my portfolio right now, and there might be 25 different cost structures in there. And the reason is, the deals are so atypical. The properties, the goals, where they are, the loans to values, the strength of the borrowers, what the borrower's needs are. So I want to make what I want to make, but there might be a lot of ways to get to it. So I'm happy to work with borrowers. But things you can count on are, it's going to cost you a lot more than borrowing your money from a bank. It's going to cost you a lot less than having a partner, because typically having a partner to me means we split the profits. So we're going to be higher than the bank, lower than having a partner, probably like having a decent credit card. I don't mean having a bad credit card that's 24%, will probably be under there, but having like a good credit card. So there are going to be points, usually 2 to 8 points depending on the lender and the deal. You're usually going to pay an interest rate in low double digits. That's 12 to 15%. For me, there's nothing else. Those are the only things you pay me are one fee and interest as the loan goes on. Other people might charge an underwriting fee, an admin fee, a doc prep fee, an inspection fee. And the reason I call that out is if you're going to shop for your money, and you should, make sure you're comparing apples to apples and ask another lender, hey, what other fees am I going to pay? Am I going to pay when you come out to inspect for my draws? Am I going to pay for you to prepare my loan documents? Because sometimes on a smaller loan, you start adding up $695 fees. It really gets up to something in percentage terms. The other thing, 2 more things I want to cover. When I'm doing a loan, the structure of cost is flexible. So you might say to me, Mark, I'm pretty flush now. I've got a lot of cash. I'm happy to maybe pay a higher rate and less points. Or you might say, Mark, I can make payments, but I am fairly tight. I want to pay more points because they're financed into the deal. I don't come out of those right away. But I need a lower interest payment to make sure this is going to work for the 6 or 8 months. So I'll be sniffing around to make sure you can really pay and that you're not just trying to talk me into a deal I'm not going to get paid on. But I understand different people have different circumstances, and that's why I have different pricing no matter what. And the last thing I had on my list before I take some questions is just a cautionary thing. With private lenders, my advice to you is never, ever, ever pay a private lender anything up front, especially if they're not local. But then it does include local guys, because there are companies I believe make a living on collecting from you an underwriting fee, an admin fee, maybe even the appraisal fee, saying, hey, we're going to put a lot of time and effort into this loan, so we need to get something. The minute you send them the money, I can almost guarantee you that you're not going to get the loan, nor are you ever going to get a refund of your money. It seems to me like they make money a few $1,000s a piece collecting fees from people. I understand part of my job is I spend time and effort and some expense sometimes working with people on a loan that's not going to happen. Sometimes I spend a ton of time and I make 0 money. And honestly, there's times I spend almost no time and I make a lot of money. And it's the mix that I live on. And if somebody wants your money up front, I really question their motives. The only thing I'd ever tell you that you might consider paying, if a lender wants you to get an appraisal, pay the appraiser directly for a couple reasons. 1, you can make sure there really is an appraisal. And 2, you want that appraisal to belong to you and not to the lender. If you send your money to the lender and the lender pays for the appraisal, it's the lender's appraisal, which means the lender's name's going to be on it. Other lenders probably aren't going to take it. If you pay for the appraisal directly, it's your appraisal. You can send it to different lenders. It has a little bit more use. So that's an overview on private lending, what it is, what we look for, how to live through it, things like that. I have business cards up here. I'd encourage everyone to take one. Email me if you'd like a copy of the outline, just so that you can go back over things. But if you have questions now, I'm happy to take as many questions as Alex will allow me to take. Sir?
Typically, should we get, if we, it's very competitive when you're looking for properties, should we get pre-approved through you first to see what option to take?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So yeah, I do pre-approval letters. Now, don't confuse that with good funds or a money available letter, because I can't tell anyone you have money in your bank account. So you get a pre-approval letter just like a bank. It says pretty much what a bank says. It will make an offer stronger. I'm going to ask you for a copy of your credit report. I'm going to ask you for just an outline of the deal. Probably not going to ask you for your application at that point, because a pre-approval letter doesn't take me too long. I'll make it property specific for you, and it'll help with your deal. Of course, it's going to be conditional, just like anyone else's pre-approval letter, on additional underwriting.
If I have an LLC that's going to take ownership of a property, say it's a triplex, 2 rentable units, and I'm living in the other, is that considered an owner-occupied property?
So that's a gray area. So if you personally owned it and you said, hey, it's 100 units and I live in one, that's owner-occupied.
Right.
We don't lend on it.
Yep.
So if I'm lending to an LLC that has you as a tenant in it, I believe it's a non-owner occupied property,
Okay.
because the LLC is not in it. The LLC is not a person, can't occupy property.
Okay.
Typically on your lines of credits, what's the LTV you go up to on your line of credits?
So it's not going to be any different than a purchase and a flip. And so I judge my LTV on the strength of a deal. Okay. So neighborhood's super important to me. So if you said I already own an investment property with equity, pretty much I'm going to look at your cash flow on that property. I'm going to look to see where the property is. Frankly, I prefer it to be in Upper St. Clair with a little less cash flow than I'll pick on Javosburg again. That probably gives a lot more cash flow. Again, just because of liquidity in case I ever own the dang thing.
Personally?
Yeah, I want to first lien. And again, unless there's a teeny little mortgage, it's almost insignificant. But I would go in a great neighborhood, you're a great borrower, everything's great, you could probably get 75% out of me.
Okay.
Yep.
Interest only on what you use?
Yeah, on the line of credit, it's interest only on what you use. And that actually leads me to another point that I think people should understand. So if it's a line of credit, we'll set something up, be interest only. However, let's say you're going to do a fix and flip loan and you're going to borrow $70,000 and you're going to use $35,000 to pay and $35,000 to fix it up. You're paying interest on $70,000 from day one. The reason is that money needs to be there for you. So I've taken that money from my own personal money and allocated it from lines of credit I use from my investors. It's sitting there, it's available. If you want a snapshot of it, you can see it to know that it's there. There's a second reason it's there, urgency. And I think Alex started with procrastination. Back in the good old days, in the early 2000s, when I was lending money and anybody could get a loan, we used to do 6 months deferred interest, right? Talk about tempting somebody into procrastination. So people would buy a house, get it all set, and I wouldn't hear from them. I'd be, that's weird. I haven't heard from like Joe Schmo about getting any draws on construction. Then a couple months later, I'm like, I better drive by and see what's going on. So I drive by the property, and not one thing has happened. So I would call Joe Schmo and say, hey, I drove by the property, like nothing's happened. And now I know nothing's happened because they haven't had to make any payments. There's been nothing to knock them off of their procrastination. Like, yeah, I'm getting on it. Next week, it's going to be blitzed with contractors, and wait till you see what you're going to see. Then what happened is nothing happened. Then at the end of 6 months, I'd say, hey, you need to start making your interest payments. Hey, is there any chance I could get an extension on those interest payments? And I said, well, you can't, because we're just going to do the same thing over and over. So I want you to feel a little bit of pressure from your lender and some sense of urgency to get this project done, because if it goes on, it's less likely to be a successful deal. And remember, successful deals mean you make a lot of money and I get paid what I'm owed. And that's how I judge a successful deal.
Typically, how quickly can you draw from that line of credit when you have it? So say I had an emergency, property needed immediate funds, I could just come.
Yeah, you'll have a form. You'll submit a request electronically, and I actually will ACH that money back out to you. That way, you don't even have the whole period at your bank. Since I'm not a bank, I'm not capable of issuing certified checks. I'll ACH it so you have good funds the next day. Okay. So you give it to me Wednesday morning. You have money in your account on Thursday. Okay. Other questions?
Do you have a minimum loan amount? Minimum and maximum?
Yeah, so let's talk about the maximum. The largest loan our company's done has been $1.5 million. So could we do a little bit more? Yeah, probably for the right deal. Are we going to do a $20 million loan? No, I don't think we have that scale. But if it's $1.5 million, $2 million, that can happen. On the minimum size, I do almost the same amount of work for any loan. So I would loan you $10,000. You might have to pay me $3,000 to get it, which in percentage terms is astronomical. But if you need $10,000 to finish a project that unlocks you being able to sell it and make your $40,000, it could very well be worth it. I'd love to say can't afford to make $10,000 loans and charge a couple $100. The fact is I probably could, but it's just not worth the time and effort. You know, there's better places for a lender to spend their time. Underwriting everything you go through is going to take you about the same amount of time.
And you brought up a good point about comparing lenders and fees. I want to step over here. I did a loan recently with a company, and their interest rate was a lot lower. But man, when I got the fees, it was unbelievable. They would charge me. It probably ended up being like an extra $3,000 or $4,000 on an $80,000 loan.
So keep in mind that's 5% more. If it was $4,000, his 1 point or 2 points he paid on the front became 6 or 7. That's why I say, I mean, I could play that game. I just am not interested in you showing up at closing and balking and having to sit there and explain, well, of course you have to pay for me to create the documents. I'd rather just say, you know what, you're paying me points and interest, and if you understand those, there aren't going to be any surprises from my end. You know, just and you'll understand them, you know, prior to a closing. You know, you'll understand everything. You know, one other thing that brought up is people talk about where you get money, and so some people say like money's the ultimate commodity. Wherever you can get it the cheapest, you might as well. And that's generally true, but not exclusively true. So some people would say, hey, the first place I'd go is my own home, and I'll get a home equity line, and I'll do my deal. And that will most certainly be cheaper than any private lender. However, if you run into a problem and you cannot pay that loan, eventually you're going to lose your house, so your private residence. So do some people say, you know what, I'll pay more to eliminate the risk of losing my home for this deal? Other people would say, look, I can mitigate the risk. I know I can always sell and break even. That's nothing I'm worried about. I'll pay less. You know, and I get something like that. You know, the other thing is, you know, consider all of your loan terms. Is your loan going to be extendable? What I tell people, if you've paid me and you've worked in good faith, I'm going to extend your loan. I've never not. I've made 320-something loans in Allegheny County. The name of every borrower is on the Recorder of Deeds website. You can pull it up yourself, and you can call them and ask any borrower that you ever felt like you were treated unfairly. It's never happened. So, you know, a guy out of California who's offering money at, you know, 1 point and 8.99% might not quite have the desire to keep a good name in the local market, and he might be a little bit more by the book on a deadline or something like that.
Cool. All right, Mark, thank you. I think everybody got a card, but if they didn't, there's some cards still left over here. And
okay. Yeah, so like I said, if you want the outline, email me or email Alex. We can send you the outline. You have questions, you want to bounce a deal off me, feel free to give me a call. Email's always better because if I keep one long email chain, I don't have to ask you the same question 5 different times. I can just look up in it and, you know, we can begin to form a deal. But you'll find I'm a guy that's on my phone and email like constantly, so you will never wait even 24 hours for any sort of response.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming.
Things that you can work on so you can take from this presentation and put it to practical use. First thing you need to probably work on is your credit score. Does everybody know what the credit score is? I'm really cognizant of what my credit score is, so you really should be. You should know what that credit score, maybe monitor it through some of the services that they have. Second thing, if you're self-employed, which I've fallen into this trap before, as Mark was saying, when you're self-employed, you want to pay the IRS, well, I guess whether you're self-employed or not, you want to pay the IRS as little money as possible. The problem with that is, first of all, you can get audited and get in trouble, which could be bad. 2, when you want to go ahead and get conventional financing and a regular loan, the bank's going to see that you're showing no income or you're showing losses, and they're not going to want to lend you money. So you have to be cognizant of that. Yeah, it's going to save you some time, some money at tax time, but it's going to cost you the ability to grow your portfolio because you won't be able to get capital from a bank. So you have to be aware of that. So if you're self-employed or just start showing more income, start planning this out. Live below your means. If you don't have to drive a brand new car, don't drive a brand new car. You have to have the delayed gratification mentality where Yes, it will come, but it might be 10 years from now when I could buy a new car, but I'll get there. So if you're not willing to do that, this is probably not going to work for you. If you're not willing to delay buying nice shiny things, this is probably not going to work for you, okay? So you have to be able to give up a little bit, live below your means. And practice becoming stronger financially. So practice saving, reducing your debt, living below your means. This is all going to help you grow. And yeah, the idea about zero money down is zero money down. So it's easy, right? But in order to expand and grow your portfolio, you're going to have to be able to you're going to have an exit strategy and be able to go to a regular lender and get this money. So I'll give you an example. If you have $30,000 in the bank and you want to buy a $100,000 duplex, the bank's going to require 20% down plus closing costs and such. So you're going to have, let's say, $30,000 invested into this property. That's great because you're going to have a nice property that's worth $100,000. At the end of the year, you have a property that's maybe now appreciated 3%, so it's worth $103,000, and it's giving you a 12% return on investment. So maybe you're bringing in $12,000 is what you made on that investment, okay? Now, if you're able to buy one property a month, one $100,000 property a month at, let's say, 7% rate of return, you're giving up 5%. So you're paying Mark, you're paying property management, you're paying for just whatever you're paying for to grow that portfolio. But now at the end of the 12 months, you have 12 properties. Those properties' gross value is $1.2 million plus that appreciated 3%, so it's whatever that is. And your income for the end of the year is about $84,000. So $7,000 a month in income versus $1,000 a month in income. Okay, you see the difference? And you would not be able to do that if you used your own money because you're relegated to one deal. So it's good at first to start with one deal and don't think you can just jump in and buy 12 properties in 1 year. It's not going to happen. It's just not realistic. But can you buy one this year and then 2 next year and then 4 the year after that and then 6 the year after that and then 32 on year 7? Absolutely. So this is all about leverage, and hopefully you're getting this and I'm conveying the message. And I guess finally, at the end of the program, which we're getting close to, Mark is the videographer here. He's going to ask anybody who wants to do like a testimony on the classes, and if you could spend a few minutes with him. Also, if you could refer any business to Deacon Hoover Real Estate Advisors, we're going to help you buy and sell your next investment. We're going to help your aunt sell her home and buy a condo in Scott Township, and sell her home in Brookline, or whatever. We're going to help you as real estate agents. I'm happy to take the phone call from a referral from friends or family, and we're happy to help. So please don't hesitate to do that. We have the property management company. We do title work, so we can do closings. You can go to Mark for a hard money loan, get the property under control, and then after 12 months, you refinance it with Terra Mortgage, so you get a conventional lender. Pay off Mark, use his money to buy another property. So just utilize our services when you can, and watch your emails. The next meetup will be next month, the second Saturday, and I don't know what the topic is yet, but I'll let you know. Stay tuned. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.